Okay, I know everyone's been dying to hear about the Justin Baldoni case. Judge, why was it dismissed? Is it over for Baldoni? What's going to happen? I'm going to get into the latest ruling by the judge dismissing Baldoni's complaint. I'm going to tell you exactly what I think and exactly why I believe Justin Baldoni is still in the game. Coming up next on Judge Liz. Hi, I'm Judge Liz and welcome to my channel. If you're a returning viewer, thank you so much for being here and welcome back. If you're new, let me introduce myself. I'm a retired circuit court judge, and if I look familiar, it's probably because I presided over one of the most closely followed and notorious mass shooting cases in American history. I recently retired and went into private practice where I'm a partner at Conrad & Scherer in Fort Lauderdale. I started this YouTube channel to go over all of the hottest cases that you want to know about, where I try to give a point of view that you won't get on any other channel. So thanks for being here and stay tuned. So as many of you know, last week the federal judge in the Justin Baldoni-Blake Lively case dismissed Justin Baldoni's countersuit where he's asking for $400 million in damages. And I'm going to go over with you the judge's rulings and exactly why I believe the judge dismissed this complaint and each of the categories in the complaint. There are three main categories in the complaint, and the first one is civil extortion. There are many counts that were pled by Justin Baldoni and his legal team that fall under the definition of civil extortion. The second category of charges or allegations fall under civil defamation. And the third category is breach of contract. I'm going to go over each one of those categories and why the judge found that Justin Baldoni and his legal team failed to adequately plead the requirements under California law which governs this case. First, let's go over civil extortion. Now, according to the judge, he set forth the law of civil extortion under California civil law, and that is that in order to prove civil extortion, the plaintiff, Justin Baldoni in this case, has to prove through his allegations in his complaint two things. One, that he was threatened by Blake Lively, and the judge said, I do find that he was adequately threatened. But the second thing that Justin Baldoni was required to prove under California law is that he suffered an actual loss of money or property as a result of the threats. In other words, she threatened, if you don't do this, then I'm going to do this. And as a result, Justin Baldoni had to turn over money or property to meet her demands. And that's where the judge said Justin Baldoni and his lawyers failed to prove that, failed to allege that, and that there's basically nothing else that they can say to be able to survive the judge's ruling on the particular counts of civil extortion. Now, I'm going to go through those extortion counts with you one by one. I'm going to summarize them because I don't think there's any reason to go read them word for word. It's not necessary. The first main allegation is that Blake Lively during COVID said, I'm not going to return to production unless you meet my 12 demands. I want an intimacy coordinator present at all times. I want, no more sexual references by any of the staff while we're on set. I want all these 12 things. Well, Baldoni and his team say, look, we were doing all of those things anyway, and some of the things that you say were going on were not going on, but we can't risk any more delays in the production of this movie. So yes, we'll sign your paper, we'll agree, because we need you to come back in order to finish up this movie and not cost us money. So you may say, well, Judge, didn't the fact that she wouldn't come back cost them time or money? Well, that was not alleged by the Baldoni campaign and the Baldoni group. He never said, Blake Lively's failure to return to the set cost me, $1 million a day, which totaled $5 million. What he said was, she caused us aggravation, she caused us delays, she caused more time, she caused us headaches, she required us to submit to all of these different things that were not originally negotiated in the contract, but the judge says you didn't allege any actual loss of money or property. Now, had she said, I'm not coming back unless you agree to a 10% increase in my salary, and had she been paid that money, that would have been sufficient for civil extortion. But that's not what happened, and that's not what was alleged. The second main category is where she said, I am not going to proceed unless you accept my rewrites and you give me a co-producer credit. Now, you may say, well, Judge, a co-producer credit is worth some money, isn't it? Well, sure, maybe it is and maybe it's not. The problem is it's not hypothetically what can be shown as a loss of money by Justin Baldoni. Did he lose some of his creative abilities? Yes. Did he lose some of his director abilities? Yes. Did he lose the ability to allow himself the actual and final decision on the rewrites? Yes. But that's not money and that's not property. Those are intangible things. Did he lose creative control of the film? Maybe. Did he lose a lot of different things as far as his reputation goes, as far as his time goes, as far as his creative abilities go? Yeah, sure. But those are not actual physical money or property. Now, again, had Blake Lively said, you accept my rewrites, you give me a co-producer credit, and you give me an extra $500,000, and Justin Baldoni had conceded to those things because he felt he had no other choice but to concede to those things, that could have been sufficient, would have been sufficient. But that's not what happened, and that's not what was alleged in his complaint. The third threat that the Baldoni camp alleges that the judge found was entirely sufficient under California law is that she said, I'm not going to the premiere unless Justin Baldoni doesn't go to the premiere. Well, again, is that a headache for Justin Baldoni? Yes. Does that damage his reputation? Probably. Does that make him look bad? Yes. Is that disheartening to him and his family when there's a film that he's worked so hard on? Probably yes, of course. But she did not gain any money or property from making that threat. Now, had she said, if you don't stay away from the premiere, I'm not going, and I also want, in addition to you staying away from the premiere, I want to be able to keep all of the wardrobe for myself, and that wardrobe was valued at, let's say, $500,000, then that would have been a loss of money or property by Justin Baldoni as a result of her threat. But again, that's not what happened. So as you can see, the judge said, look, she did threaten you. I'll give you that. You have pled that sufficiently. But under California law, that is not enough. You had to have actually lost money or property, which you did not lose. And therefore, I'm dismissing the counts of civil defamation. Now, some of you may be thinking, well, what do you think, Judge? Do you agree or do you disagree? Well, I do agree that the judge properly followed the correct law of civil extortion under California law, and that California law requires a party to show not only a threat, but the actual loss of money or property. Now, again, I'm not talking about loss of reputation, loss of time. I'm not talking about intangible losses, which Justin Baldoni clearly suffered. In other words, I think that Blake Lively, I think it's very clear that she did try to take credits for this film. I think she tried to take over this film. I think she tried to take too much of a creative role and a director role and a producer role. Yes, I agree she did all of that. But I also agree with the judge that those are intangible things, that they are not a loss of actual money or property. And so I agree that Justin Baldoni's lawyers failed to adequately make the allegations under California law, and that those particular counts should have been dismissed. What I do not agree with is a second set of counts, which fall under defamation. To simplify and cause for defamation, the California courts and the judge in this case, which are following the law of the California courts, define defamation as follows. It's an injury to somebody by the lying by somebody else. So in other words, Justin Baldoni would have to say that, or prove that Blake Lively lied about him, made statements lying about him, and that those lies injured his reputation. Well, the judge went through California law, and under California law, the judge got to only the first component, which was the lies by Blake Lively. And he first says, okay, was there a statement that could be considered a lie by Blake Lively made against Justin Baldoni? And the judge goes through 20 pages of analysis. And he finally concludes that it's obvious that Blake Lively, based on the circumstantial evidence, absolutely gave the CRD complaint to the New York Times, that she accompanied that complaint with text messages. It's obviously that was her, and that she therefore, yes, made statements through the New York Times about Justin Baldoni. Now, were they lies and did they injure his reputation? The judge doesn't even get to that analysis, because under California law, those statements are privileged thanks to the passing of 47.1, which says any statements made by a person that are about sexual harassment are completely and 100% privileged. Now, let me tell you why I do not agree with this. Let's say that I am an evil, disgusting person and I want to make a complaint against my boss that I was sexually abused, that I was locked in a closet, that I was kept against my will overnight, that all of these horrendous things were done to me. Let's say I'm just a crazy person or I'm a psychopath and I decide to make those allegations. So I take these crazy allegations and I get a CRD complaint and I start filling it out. And even before I've submitted it, I turn it over to the local newspaper. And the local newspaper then, based on this complaint that I've given them, publishes an article that my boss, who let's say is a family man, who is man of the year, who's there, parades for. And this guy's like the nicest guy, and he's married, and he's got 4 children, and he gives to charity, and he's like father of the year, okay, in this example. But the local newspaper publishes all of the allegations that I've given them in a complaint that I've not even filed yet. Under California law, Father of the Year cannot do anything to me because my statements are 100% privileged under 47.1, and no one can do anything to me. And Father of the Year, in my hypothetical, has absolutely no recourse of action and cannot sue me for defamation. This is under California law. And the reason that I'm giving you an extreme example is because California law does not contemplate for a situation like my hypothetical or like the allegations made in the Blake Lively case. These allegations could be entirely false, 100% false. And even though the court said, yes, Blake Lively turned over this information to the New York Times. Yes, she did it before she even filed the complaint. And yes, there was an article that was published that was accessible to everyone and their mother, which then snowballed into Justin Baldoni getting fired from WME and every other thing. He may never work a day in his life. Under California law, he has absolutely no recourse. And he cannot sue for defamation because his privilege is 100% and it protects Blake Lively no matter what she says. And it is not waived by the fact that the judge even agrees she gave this complaint to the New York Times before she even filed the complaint. And the judge says, you know what? And the text messages that may have been misleading, that may have been, only portions of the text messages, even though she gave all of these, and all of this information in the CRD complaint, any of those statements are covered under an absolute privilege, and therefore we don't even get to the second part of the defamation allegation. Defamation fails. So unlike civil extortion, I'm sure it's clear to everyone how I feel about this whole defamation thing. I think that California law is absurd. I think that it's unfair. I think that it violates Justin Baldoni's constitutional rights. And if I were his lawyer, I would file an appeal to the California Court of Appeals, and if I had to, all the way up to the Supreme Court. Now, in this case, they don't have to go through the California courts because they're already in federal court, so that's a good thing. But I would 100% appeal this decision. I would challenge the constitutionality of 47.1. It is unfair. It violates the constitutional rights of Justin Baldoni and any other person who may be falsely accused. It only considers one half of the equation. It does not consider any type of situation where a person may be lying, may be completely defaming another person, ruining the person's life, ruining the person's career. I think it's ridiculous. I think it's silly. I think it's unconstitutional. I think it should be appealed. And I think that's Justin's course of action in this case. That's what I would do if I were him. That's what I would do if I were his lawyer. As far as the breach of contract goes, the judge already ruled that Justin Baldoni can refile his complaint. As far as the breach of contract counts go, I'm sure that his lawyer will do so. In the meantime, let's stay tuned and see what happens, because this goofy California law, it's not right. It's not fair. And I think that although it's going to be something where Blake Lively has won the battle, but she's going to lose the war, I think that's the scenario here. I think that there is no way that this law can stand, not only just because of this case, but in a case that I just gave you. In a situation where it's an extreme example I mean, what happens to that poor Father of the Year? What happens to Justin Baldoni? Can anybody say anything against anyone in this country and it damage the person, even ruin the person with no ramifications? I don't think so. That's not the United States. That's not the law. It's not fair. Women should not have absolute rights over men in any situation. I understand the passing of this law was to protect women, but what about the men? Because there are a lot of good men out there that don't do horrible things to women. So there should not be a double standard. It shouldn't be a situation where just because a woman was wronged or women were wrong in the whole hashtag Me Too movement, that now men are just cast aside. And anytime a woman says anything, the woman's side is taken. No, that's going back to the old days where a woman could be mistreated and domestic violence committed against her. And there were no laws to help a woman in that situation. Well, we've reversed this whole scenario and we've turned it now on the men where the men have no recourse. That's not fair. That's not just. I don't believe in it. I think it's ridiculous. I think it should be appealed. And that's all I have to say about that. Whether you agree or disagree, I'd love to hear from you. Please leave a comment below. Tell me what you think. Tell me if I forgot anything. Tell me if there's more information you'd like to hear or something that I didn't consider. I do try to read all of the comments. I take them into consideration. I try to respond to the majority of comments. And with that, that's Judge Liz, and thank you for watching.